welcome back. In this particular segment, we'll be looking at what are components in React. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so I have taken this code from one of our previous unboxes. It's nothing new, it's just a div. Inside this, we have one header tag in which this text is written, and then we have an unordered list of these three. Now, up till now, you can see the folder structure has been sort of this, like consistently this much only, in which we had one index.html, we never touched this, and styles.css, which sometimes turned out to be empty, and index.js, and whatever code we wrote in this project, we used to write that inside index.js. But according to the standard practice, we are not supposed to write any code inside index.js. I'll let you know what I mean by this. So currently, another reason is this particular code is not that lengthy, but when eventually the projects get bigger and bulkier, it keeps on adding more lines and more lines of code, and sometimes it even it tends to get hundreds or thousands of lines of code. So if you try to put all that inside one file, although it will not affect the functionality of your code to that extent, but it will simply not be that feasible and not readable by other humans. So one other important factor that we should always consider while writing code is not only the efficiency but also the readability. So here's where the components in React come into picture. So we've heard about them a lot of times, and this time we'll be using them. So you can see that currently all of our code is residing inside this one file called index.js. But React recommends to split this code into several little components and then combining them back up in order to form the initial file. Okay, so let me tell you what I mean by this. Let's say we have this header h1 with us. Now, currently we can see that there's only one little text written inside this, but in sometimes you might be having much more inside your heading part of your website, maybe having a navigation bar or adding some styling in it. So you instead of having one line of code for your heading part, you might be having several lines of code. So we are just imitating that part, and we're not trying to make our code more bulky. The intention here is to learn how to split this project into several components and then integrate it back into so that it works in its initial form rather than creating more complex things. So what we do is, first we create a function of whatever let's say component we want to create. Okay, so at first we want to separate this header from here, this h1 tag. So what we do is we declare a function, and always remember, whenever we are giving names to functions, they must be in Pascal case, which means the first letter of our function should always be capitalized. So let's call our top function as header. Now since it's a function, we'll have this opening and closing braces denoting it is a function, and then these two curly braces will depict the scope of our function. Now what this header function will do, it will do nothing but it will return something, and in our case it will be returning this h1 tag. Okay, so our functions will be returning HTML elements, and right now we are returning only one h1 from this. Now the great functionality about them is these functions enable us, or let's say these functional components enable us to create our own custom made components which will behave exactly like the normal HTML elements. So what I mean to say by that is, let's say we can we can say that, all right, what if I had a tag with me of HTML, which is a header tag. Now we know that no such tag exists, or if even if I rename my function to ABCD and write ABCD here, that will still work. So what this function did was, it helped me create this particular custom HTML tag for me. All right, and you can see the content or whatever we are being displayed is same as initial. Now if you don't have any children inside these tags of yours, so you can simply remove this closing header tag and just apply this slash here, which will represent that this particular is a self-closing tag. Or even if you just write this and you have this linter working inside this code sandbox, and if you hit Control S, it should automatically do it for you. Okay, so it is not doing for me somehow. Most of the time it should work. Anyways, I added it manually. So this way I have successfully taken out this h1 tag from here. I've created a function of that, and then I am now using this custom let's say HTML, this new custom HTML tag for me, which is being given to me by this function. Now another question you might be having is that if I am writing this function inside index.js, then what's the point of having separate components? Because ultimately it is creating more lines of code. And if you're thinking this, you are absolutely correct. So we need to take this function out of index.js. So what we will do is, we will create another file. Let's call our file header.jsx. So JSX will denote that we'll be writing React code inside this, and then we'll simply cut this header function from here and we'll paste it here. Now, in order to make this React code work inside our header.jsx, we need to import this React module inside this header.jsx file as well. Okay, now we have successfully extracted that header function out of index.js. But the problem is, now our index.js is not aware that any such function exists. That's why it is saying that header is not defined. So what do we need to do with it now? That's when the most versatile and the most reliable let's say logistic carriers of our React project step in, and these are the import and export keywords. So as you know, their names speak for themselves. Like import means you are importing something from outside into your current file, and when you are exporting something, that means you are taking your particular file and you are exposing it to some outer environment as in outside of this file. Okay, now what I mean by this is that this particular function that I have written here, now I need to export this function, or I need to expose this function for any other file who might be needing it. So how do we do it? We have to write export, and then we have to write default. Now what this default stands for, we'll be discussing this in the upcoming session. And then we have to write the name of our function. Now keep in mind that you should not apply this opening and closing brace right here, because this will call this header function right here, but we don't want to call it yet. We just want to export it out of this header.jsx file. Now since we have successfully exposed our header function, it is time to now import this header function. Now when we are importing a particular function, what we do is we write the name of that function along with the location where it is where the file is located of that particular function. So in this case, it is located at the same level as index.js. So I will simply write /header.jsx. Now from here you can see, okay, Let me just refresh this right here, header.jsx, and now you can see it is working absolutely fine. Now from ES6 onwards, applying this extension of .jsx or whatever file we are importing, this is optional now. So in order to make our code a little bit more shorter, we'll remove it. You can add it if you want, but naturally we will prefer to write less lines of code. So now truly we have achieved the target of moving this particular element, or let's say this particular part of our code that we initially wrote inside index.js. We have successfully extracted it out of index.js. We have created another function in which that particular part of code is being returned, and then we are importing that function from some outer file whose location will be mentioned under these quotations, and then that will enable us to form our own custom component right here. Now the next thing that we'll be doing is we'll be doing exactly the same thing with this unordered list as well. But before I do this, I want you guys to give it a try and see whether you can achieve the same thing that we did with the header component. We have to create one list component and then do the exact same thing with this unordered list as well. So pause this video and give it a try yourself. Alright, so initially what we will do is we will create a function. Let's call our function uList because it's an unordered list. You can name it whatever you want, and then we'll be returning all of these lines of code. Let me just cut them and paste them like this. Okay, and now instead of writing all of those lines of code, what I will be writing is just uList as if it was some custom component of mine. And now you can see the same code is being displayed now. Similarly, I will be creating another .jsx file for this, and then I will be cutting this from here, pasting it here. Same thing with the React module. We have to import it in order to make your React code work, and then we will have to export it as default, and we will write the name of our function. Finally, heading towards index.js, we have to import our uList from the specified path, which will be this. And then you will be able to see that our code will be behaving exactly the same as it did initially. Okay, so now you can see what we don't have any let's say hard-coded code inside our index.js now. Whatever we wrote inside it, we have successfully created separate components out of it. Now there's one more thing. According to standard convention, we are supposed to put all this clutter, because right now we just have 2 custom components, but in several cases you might be having 20, 30 and even up to like n number of such components, and it will again do the same thing. Index.js will become very lengthy. So what React recommends us to do is to create a file called app.jsx. It is a standard convention to name it app.jsx, and then what we do is we create a function app, and then from this particular function we will be returning all the custom components. Whatever code we have written, we will be returning it inside this. Okay, like when we were returning the header tag, we'll be returning it here, and the uList will be returning it here. Now let's adjust our code according to this particular structure, and soon it will start making sense to you. First of all, we'll import the React modules in order to make our React code work. Next thing, we have to import both of these functions inside app in order to make it work, and then we have to further export this app as default. Finally, we'll move inside index.js, and then we'll import this app from its location, which is simply /app. And now, instead of writing all of this, we have to write app like this. When you hit save, it will be like this. Okay, header from header, we are writing a function, we are returning header and ulist from here. They are at the same level. Okay, let me save it first. Ulist. Do you want a JSX fragment? Are we doing anything wrong here? This is a return statement. A header file. Okay, I'm sorry guys, since we are returning two elements here, we have to wrap them inside our div, which I forgot. Okay, now doing it like this. Oops, the slash comes before in the case of div, like this. Okay, yeah, so since there were more than one component, we wrapped them inside a div. And now what changes we made is we extracted the header code inside header.jsx. We extracted the code for unordered list inside ulist, and then we imported both of them inside app.jsx. We created a function of app, and then we mentioned them, we returned them as our custom components here, and then we exported this app as default, which we imported back in index.js. And since now app is only one of our component, we don't have to wrap it inside some div or something. And then our render function is back to being a one-line function as we did initially. So now if you compare our code with whatever React code you might have encountered from online resources, this is precisely the structure that you might have seen, that inside index.js you must have seen this app custom component mentioned here, and whatever code was written, it must be written inside this app.jsx file. And then further, these particular components, it might be the case that this header was importing some other components and then displaying it right here, and you can see it goes on, it forms sort of like a tree structure in which one particular file is dependent on another file, and then they keep building on top of one another. Now, although this is how we are supposed to split up our components, there's one more thing left, and that is, right now we had 3 of these JSX files, even though we had such little amount of code being displayed on the right side pane of ours. But there must be cases in which you might be having around 20 or 50 such .jsx files, and then it will just simply mess up with your folder structure right here. So what we tend to do is, by standard convention, we put all of these files inside a folder. Now, normally the folder that we create is named as components, and then what we do is we simply move all of these files inside this component folder, and then updating the path of inside index.js, and now you can see the code is working just fine as it was working initially. Inside components folder, you will be able to see app.jsx, header.jsx, and ulist.jsx. Now the way we have created this components folder and like moved all the 3 files of ours, all the one app.jsx file and the 2 separate functions that we have created. Now here also the same condition might apply, like there might be n number of files, and then again, so what you can do is you can further create these subfolders to make it more modular and more manageable. So for example, you can create there might be one folder entirely responsible for the functions related to the login screen, or one folder that is entirely responsible for containing all the files related to the register screen, and so on and so forth. So in this session, you might have seen that in terms of changing the behavior or changing the content of our code, we haven't done anything. What we have done as a developer is we have created a more modular code, we have created a more scalable code, and on top of that, the most important part, a more readable code. So for example, now if another person starts working on your code and there is some fault, let's say with respect to the header section, so then instead of going through one particular file or going through a like huge and n number of lines of code, that particular person can just head over to the header file, because he knows that whatever code is relevant to the header section, it will be inside this header function, inside this header file. So this way it is very easy to debug in such cases as well. Okay, so apart from this, in this particular session we have seen about the components, and in the upcoming one I am planning to have a practice session on this same knowledge. So let's move into that particular section. Alright guys, now we are inside a new sandbox. Basically not a new sandbox. I think we created this file in the styling in React section. So you all might know this particular code works according to the current time of your system. If it is between 6 AM to 6 PM, it will be showing its day and night like this with the color of red, and in the remaining time it will be showing its night and dark. And we are applying a little styling from styles.css to this h1 tag of ours as well. So what we are going to do is, first let me once again demonstrate to you what this function does. Let's say it's okay, someone might think, why am I always taking March? Let's say it's 14/8/2021 the date is, and the time is around 1 PM in the afternoon. So it will be showing its day and night in red, and if the time is, let's say, around 10 PM, it will be its night and dark. Okay, let's remove this. Now let's see what is expected from us in this practice session. Okay, we have to have precisely the same functionality, and we have to arrange the folder or the file structure in the form of React components. So basically we have to do exactly what we just learned right now, and separate this code, extract this from index.js, create separate files, paste it there, play with import and export keywords, and then you have to make it work as it is working right now. So pause this and give it a try yourself. Okay guys, first of all we need to make a file called app.jsx, and then we'll create a file. Since we have only one header right here, we will call our file header.jsx. Oops, I created a folder instead. Okay, let me remove this. We have to create a file header.jsx. So let me first copy this entire logic from here. I will just cut it and paste it like this. Okay, now let's put our logic inside our function, which is named header, like this, and putting it like this. And then this particular header function of ours will be returning whatever we are returning right here, like this. Like, we'll be cutting it from here and pasting it like this. So in order to make our code work, we have to import the React modules like this. Similarly, in app.jsx, we'll create a function of app, and then we will be returning our custom header tag from here. And in order to help Code Sandbox understand which header function we are talking about, we need to import it from header. It will be ./header because both of them are located at the same level. Then we'll be exporting this app oops as a default. Finally, moving inside index.js, we'll be importing this app from the path of, let me add a components folder in between as well. Okay, now this particular one, and then let's create a components folder as well in order to maintain the consistency of our code. We'll move both of these files inside this, and we'll hit save. Here in header.jsx, let me see. Okay, we have not exported our header function. Let's export it like this, and React from React function header. We're exporting our header as a default. Okay, we haven't. Is it like a copy of this header file? Okay, let's then delete this one. Now we have index.js components folder at the same level. Okay, we have an app right here, and we are returning a header function. Import React from React, import header from header. Okay, it is talking about index.js. Okay, we forgot to put this under quotations, I think. Like this. Okay, and then we have a typo in default, FAULT, like this. Okay, so let's hit save here, and here. So this way. Okay, again we messed something up. Let's remove this. I don't know why it keep coming. Now we have a components folder. We have an app.jsx file inside this. It is importing a header function from header file. Header.jsx file is here. We have our entire logic inside this header function, and then it is finally returning a h1 tag with a head. This particular head variable, it will be storing its day and bright or its night and dark according to the time of our system, according to these particular conditions. And then we are adding these styles associated with the heading class, which is mentioned inside styles.css folder. And we are also applying a style from this particular object, in which we'll be we'll be altering the color of our text according to these conditions. Then having it inside app.jsx, we are returning it as a custom component. And then finally, we are rendering this app component inside index.js, just like we discussed in the previous session, components in React. So I hope you were able to achieve this. Let me change displays first. So I hope you were able to understand whatever we went through in this particular session. Remember, comment section is yours for any sort of queries or any suggestion for me. And that's it for this particular session. I'll see you in the next one.